So forget about all these boring lifting videos. Let's talk about what really matters. My favorite video games of all time. So the first game on this list is Soma. I can think of several games with bad storylines, but great gameplay. But this is probably the only example of a game where I can say the gameplay is pretty bad, but the story is excellent. I would consider this the greatest storyline in a game I've ever played. It gave me the same feeling from finishing a good episode of Black Mirror, and it's actually quite similar to one of the best episodes. Nier Automata. There are actually quite a few things I dislike about this game, which is a shame because these are problems that could potentially be fixed very easily. The healing system is broken, the fact that you can easily buy close to 300 potions after a few hours of gameplay is ridiculous. To make things worse, when you're in combat, you can continually use as many potions as you like. So you can use up to 300 potions in a single encounter. The difficulty scaling is also bad. The game is poorly balanced. The normal mode is actually easy mode, and the hard mode actually means very hard mode. So why is this game on the list if I have a lot of problems with it? It's because of the soundtrack and the story. The soundtrack is amazing. It's by far my favorite soundtrack in a video game. The story is something you'd be thinking about for weeks after finishing the game. SSX Tricky. So this is a game I absolutely loved when I was growing up. I like when games take some kind of sport and just make it unrealistic and ridiculous, like the Tony Hawk games or Ridge Racer. But this game just takes it to the next level and lets you breakdance on your snowboard 50 meters in the air and allows you to grind on a rail at 80 miles per hour. This is why I love this game so much. Everything is so over the top and wacky with its presentation. There's a big variety of characters with different personalities. I definitely sunk a lot of hours into the SSX games growing up, but Tricky was by far my favorite. Ridge Racer for the PSP. So this has been the only racing game I've ever been into. I've tried games like Gran Turismo and Forza Horizon, but I never enjoyed them. The drift mechanics and easy to learn controls made this game so satisfying. It's not overly complicated and it gets the job done. It's everything you want in an arcade game. Omori. This game tackles dark topics. It even mentions this as a warning when you boot up the game. One moment, the presentation is cute and childish, and the next minute it'll transition to psychological horror moments, hinting at the overall plot of the storyline. Even though there's a lot of filler in the story, which is one of the biggest criticisms of the game, I actually enjoyed every moment of the game, even the dream world segments that had nothing to do with the overall plot. To me, it felt like a strength rather than a weak point of the game. Besides the story and characters, I love the art in the game. You can tell the game is inspired by Earthbound and Undertale, and if you like those games, you'll like Omori. Overwatch, when it was good. Zelda Breath of the Wild. To this day, I don't think there's a Nintendo Switch game that matches the graphics and details this game has to offer. I played the game twice. The first time was in 2017 when it came out for the Switch, but I also played it on PC with the Wii U emulator. Playing the game in 4K ultra wide at 60 FPS was certainly a treat. Usually when I play games, I rarely spend time on the side missions. I usually just play the main quests because that's usually the most engaging part of the game. But Breath of the Wild is interesting in that you can actually just go and fight the final boss without doing anything else. It'll be extremely difficult, of course, so the game kind of makes it a requirement to naturally go around the world and do side quests. It truly makes you feel free to go anywhere you like at any time. unlike most open world games where it's still linear with its storytelling. If you enjoy stupid content like this, then you'll enjoy my Patreon. For only $1, you can watch videos such as building a gym in Minecraft, why powerlifting sucks, why you don't train hard enough, and finally, why you should quit weightlifting. The link will be in the description and pinned comment on this video. The Walking Dead game Season 1. I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. Yes, I watched the entire TV series and it's terrible, but the original comic book series and the video game are great. The story and ending of Season 1 is 10 out of 10. The Wolf Among Us. Another Telltale game. I would actually rate this game higher than the Walking Dead game. I'm really excited for the sequel. The comic series it's based off of is also excellent. Doom Eternal. Before, I never really liked first-person shooters as a video game genre. I always found them awkward on consoles and never had the patience to hold back from enemy fire. Then I got introduced to PC gaming and realized mouse and keyboard controls made first-person shooters more playable. So then I sort of got into first-person shooters. But like I said, I never really enjoyed holding back and sneaking around with first-person shooters. I just never had the patience for that. But then Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal came out, and I just fell in love with those games. The way the games are designed actually makes it optimal to run directly into the enemy and run around like a lunatic. The game will actually punish you if you decide to hold back like other first-person shooters. It just doesn't work like that. All these mechanics, the fast-paced nature of the game, and the intense soundtrack will certainly rise your heart rate like you're actually the main character in the game destroying a bunch of demons. It's just so satisfying. Super Mario Land 2. I remember playing this game a lot as a kid. Probably my most played Game Boy game. A few years ago, I actually replayed it using an emulator. It was still as good as I remember, unlike trying to play some old PS1 games. Persona 5. I really like Persona 3 and Persona 4, but these games had their problems. Persona 5 beats both those games in almost every area. Unfortunately, most JRPGs have drifted away from what players want and from classic JRPG mechanics, writing confusing storylines, completely removing turn-based combat, and so many other things. But it's like the creators of Persona 5 created a game just like the other Persona games, but way more enhanced. Persona 3 had a very good story, but a weak point of the game was its dungeon crawling. The main part of the game was going through a long dungeon which looked the same and barely had any design thought. Persona 4 improved on its dungeons for sure, but not to the extent as Persona 5 did, where each area is carefully made with good puzzles and environments. Every new area actually feels new, unlike the previous two games. The story and characters in Persona games is really a strong point. The gameplay is basically split into two parts. One is dungeon crawling and the other is the social link system. The social link feature is kind of like the mechanics of a dating game, and it sort of is in a sense. Increasing your social links will increase your power in the dungeon crawling part of the game. It sounds boring, but it's a great feature to learn more about the characters in the game. The story in Persona 5 is strangely like Death Note, which is an anime I really liked. In fact, this whole game feels like you're watching a very good anime. A surprisingly cool feature of the game is the user interface. Persona 5 has the best UI in a game I've ever played. It's incredibly creative and looks amazing. The only part of the game that I didn't enjoy as much as the previous two games was the soundtrack. And that's a controversial opinion, but it's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I just prefer the soundtrack in Persona 3 and especially 4. Every other part of the game is much better in Persona 5. Neon White. More and more games are coming out each year. Certain genres are becoming saturated and games are starting to feel the same. Developers try to get around this by making their games unique to make them stand out. And Neon White is certainly one of the most unique games I've ever played. With a lot of platformers, there's not a lot of incentive to replay levels and try to find the most optimal route or way to progress. With Neon White, it really encourages you to replay the levels. You can tell the game was influenced by the speedrunning community. So the way it's designed allows you to quickly reset and try a run again instantly. The urge to get all the medals will keep you hooked for hours. Hollow Knight. So this game came as a surprise to me. I didn't know what to expect going in. I thought it was just another 2D platformer, which would be a lot of fun for a few hours, but nothing revolutionary. I was completely wrong. The game shows that 2D games aren't just a throwback to the past, making you love them only for nostalgia. With all the hype these days on powerful PCs and consoles, with the focus on realism with graphics, it's like it makes people feel like that's the end goal of video games. But games like this show that classic Metroidvania type games had something special in their design, even though those games were just made that way because of hardware constraints in the past. Even though Hollow Knight is a low budget game and only made by a handful of people, it's one of the greatest games ever made. The game is brutally hard but fair, and it has similar elements to Dark Souls, which is interesting as a 2D game. The world is massive with loads of areas to explore, multiple different paths you can take with different ways you can get there. It's very well designed. The environments, the art style, and music is top notch. I have no complaints about the game at all. It's a masterpiece, which I'll definitely play again. Disgaea. I doubt most people watching this would even know what this game is, and they probably wouldn't even enjoy it if they did play it. This is a game I put hundreds of hours into when it came out for PS2. One of the most addictive games I've ever played. So, if you're unaware, Disgaea is like Final Fantasy Tactics on Trenbolone. It's kind of like chess, but with far more variation and RPG elements. Sounds hard to get into, and it is quite confusing if you never played a game like it, but once you get into it, it's incredibly addicting and fun. I have played all the Disgaea games except the 6th one. My main issue is they add more and more mechanics each game, making it more and more complicated and ridiculous, and not in a good way. As a side note, a game that I prefer over the recent Disgaea games is Into the Breach. Although I still need to play more of it, I only played it for 15 hours. Hotline Miami 2. This game could be terrible and I would still play it just to listen to the music. Final Fantasy X. With its terrible voice acting and outdated gameplay, this is still one of my favorite games of all time. I remember I had multiple save files and I completed the game multiple times. While I did enjoy the gameplay way more in Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy's strong point should always be its story, and Final Fantasy X's story is unforgettable. Slay the Spire. I was initially turned off this game because I was never into card games, but as a big fan of the roguelike genre, I decided to give it a go, and it's the most addictive game I've ever played. I actually just played before recording this, and I'm probably going to play afterwards. I wouldn't say it's a bad addiction, like playing a terrible mobile game with microtransactions. It's a good addiction. Okay, maybe it's not. I need to stop playing. In my opinion, the most interesting part of this game is the choices you make. Sure, the battles with enemies can be challenging, but it really comes down to the cards you choose and which path you take. Learning how to make a synergistic deck, learning how the cards interact with each other, and learning to adapt with the card rewards you are given is necessary to progress in this game. It offers huge variety in gameplay, allowing you to easily play for hundreds of hours. Kingdom Hearts. I have mixed feelings about this game. I played pretty much every Kingdom Hearts game, minus the weird ones. My main issue is that there's just too many of them. It's essential to play all of them and research Wikipedia just to understand the complex storyline. I mean, in a way, it's kind of fun to fully understand the convoluted storyline.
Diz is Ansem, is the original Ansem, not Ansem like you fight at the beginning.
But if the Kingdom Hearts story was condensed into 2 or 3 games, I'd definitely appreciate it a lot more. That being said, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 and Birth by Sleep are still my favorite games of all time. Also, controversially, I really liked Chain of Memories. Crap, I guess I do like card games. Ender Lilies. This game released last year when the Metroidvania genre started to become saturated after the release of Hollow Knight. I thought this was going to be another Ori-like or Hollow Knight-like game with nothing original, but I was wrong. I loved everything about this game. The atmosphere, the music, and the challenging combat. Also, it's definitely one of my favorite video game soundtracks. I think I said that several times in this video. But anyways, that's my list of favorite games. If you enjoyed this type of content, then feel free to check out my Patreon, where I upload plenty of stupid videos like this.